So yeah, thanks for those who are here for our April session. Diana, if you want to maybe stop sharing now, and I'll hand over to you to introduce our guest speaker for the session.
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay, so today's speaker is Jet Zoon. She's a data steward research at Princess Máxima Center for Pediatric Oncology at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. She has a background in neuroscience, human nutrition to be more precise, and teaching. She started her work as data steward research in the big data core at the Princess Máxima Center for Pediatric Oncology in 2020. She now coordinates around 30 local data stewards in the Institute and is involved in policy writing, research data management training and support, and much more. Last year, the Máxima Center introduced their own institutional DMP template for preclinical research. And this was approved by the Dutch Research Council and the Netherlands Organization for Health Research and Development. During this drop-in session, Jet will take us through the process of setting up this data management template and how it works for them. Hi, Jet, if you want to share your screen and make a start.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'll share. And is this okay? Check, check. Yes. Okay, so thank you for the introduction, and thanks for having me present today. Yeah, as was mentioned, I set up the institutional grant application template, and it has been released last year. And while there are still some issues, so I'll also be discussing that, and maybe we can brainstorm a bit later on. But first, a bit of background and the scope. So I wanted to show you the process of setting up and implementing the institutional DMP template. I'll go into it shortly because I think it's more interesting to have a bit of interaction as well. We chose to use DMPonline, otherwise I wouldn't be here, of course. And I'll also let you know why that is. So for our institute, the mission of the entire institute is to cure every child with cancer with optimal quality of life. And we're organized in two main sections. So we have the clinic and the research. It becomes a bit difficult because we also have clinical researchers, and there's a bit of a separation between clinical and preclinical research as well. But the idea is that there's a lot of interaction between the daily practice of caring for these children with cancer and the knowledge that's being developed by research. So this is a bit of the context. And within research, we ran into a few problems concerning the DMP templates, because there are a lot of templates, as I think all of you might know, for the different funders. And this is a bit of a problem for the researchers, because for each application they do, they have to write another DMP. They have to change the format of their text to have it fit the template that they are currently using. And they already have limited time. So we wanted to have a way to save a bit of time and to make it more straightforward, to have these researchers use one template, ideally, for different funders. Another problem was that there are no standard texts available. So the question that I get a lot is, do you have any texts on privacy, for example? Because they might know a bit about how it's organized, but they don't have an official text about it, and they don't feel like they're the expert on that on that topic. So they would like to have a standard text that they can use in their DMP. And so this was another reason we sought for a good solution. And the solution we found was to use DMPonline and have one institutional grant application template for multiple funders, and also to use it as a platform to share texts between researchers. So what I now advise is to, after the grant has been provided, to share the DMP that has been created for that grant or related to that grant, because other researchers within our institute can use this information for their own DMP. So I will not be the one writing numerous texts on privacy or other related topics, but they are able to use their information and share their information via DMPonline. So with regard to the development of the template, I looked back and tried to see what stages or what steps I took to set it up. Well, first was to determine the core funders. I see there's already a question. Is it related? Yeah, is it? You can already ask it if you want.
Yeah, I wonder. So you request the researchers to make their DMP public, I guess. So
well, within the institute.
Within the institute, and do you also check the ones who were made public within the institute, or is it a default request for your researchers?
It's an advice that I give. So we don't have any strict rules about it, and I must say we've released the institutional template last year, and it's not being used that often. So as I mentioned, there are still some issues to implement it fully, and to make sure that people really use it and make the most out of it. So also to share information amongst each other. But this is what I think
it's really a nice idea. But the best case, they get inspired by the texts, and as you say, all these researchers can produce more text than you can do on your own. And the worst case,
also sometimes they can maybe write some specific text on the topics, and because we are a very specific institute oriented towards a specific topic, then it's easier to reuse texts as well.
Yeah, but in the worst case, you get a recycling. You recycle bad texts.
Yeah.
So it's an upside and a downside. I really like the idea, but I was wondering about the downside.
Yes, we'll still have to find that out, I think. Yes, thank you for the question.
Thank you.
So for the development of the template, I started out with determining what the core funders were for our type of research. So we came up with NWO and ZonMW. So I'm not sure what the English terms are. They were mentioned before by Diana. And we also have KICA and KWF, two funders that are really related to cancer research. KICA is specific for pediatric cancer, and KWF is related to also to adult cancers. But these are really big players in this field. So we wanted to make sure that there was a match with the template that we were about to set up and their requirements. So I took all the information from the different sites, and I requested some extra information also. And this is what I used to merge these core funder DMP templates. And then after that, I added common institutional RDM solutions as tick boxes. So for example, if you look at storage solutions, we have some institutional storage solutions. So that's what we chose as tick boxes. So it's really easy to fill out. You recognize the options that there are, and you're also a bit limited to the options there are, which means that safety of the data is also well, taken care of in a better way. Then I started to think of what is the dependence within the template. For example, if you answer, I use this type of storage solution, maybe that means that later on you don't need to answer some other questions as well. So I created interdependence between the questions. For example, if you're answering X, it will remove the question Y. And I also added the mail notification functionality. So we have a question about using virtual machine. For example, if they use a lot of compute power, they need to use a lot of compute power. And then a mail is sent to IT research. And we also use a threshold for the question, how much data will you save or will be generated within the research? And then an email will be sent to the big data core, which I'm part of, and we'll be able to advise those people specifically on what type of storage they need to use or what other things they need to consider when working with big data. So when all that was arranged, I started working on the guidance, and I looked into all the information in the NWO template, because there's already a lot of guidance in there, a lot of explanation on what they want to know or what options there are, and they also link to a lot of useful websites. And I looked into the ZonMW key items because they really have a basic set. I think there were 7 or 8 items that that they developed, that they set up, which they want to see in their template. So if they receive a template, then they specifically look for these key items. That's the basic thing that needs to be filled out. And then, well, add example text as well, because I already received some filled out DMPs from researchers. So I used some of those texts, made it a bit more generic, and I used it as example text in the DMP form as well. So those are the 7 steps I took. And then it was a matter of getting the template approved by ZonMW and NWO, because this is provided by those funders, and for KICA and KWF it's not provided, or it's not a standard option. So I started out with these 2 parties, and they work together, so it's quite easy. You just send a mail to data management at NWO, and then they looked into my template. I was able to send them a link, which worked quite nicely. And they were happy with what they saw. The only thing I had to change was the numbering of the questions. So they wanted to be able to refer to a certain question with the number. So I had to add the number of the question before the written out question. So that was a basic requirement, and the key items was also one of the points that was important to them. So we're now visible on both sides, and you can link through to the DMP template there, so that's easy. So what do we have now? This is the results. We actually have 2 templates now. So one is the approved grant application template, and we also use a PhD or project specific template, which is more based on the daily use of data, daily practice. But I will not go into that. Maybe later a bit, but so the sections I used or I came up with when I was merging the different templates, they were 10, so 10 sections, and of course you have to provide a bit of general information. What consortia do you work with, for example, or what's the name of the researcher? Give a bit of a project description, provide some information on data collection creation, and I chose to use a separate section for metadata because I think that's, it should be highlighted and it should be sort of lifted out of all the other sections to emphasize that it's really important to think about metadata. Yeah, so also storage and backup, security, protection of sensitive data, intellectual property, archiving, reuse, and data management costs, so the financial part of it. And as you can see, so there are some numbers behind the sections. Those are the number of questions related to this section. And as you can see, the reuse part is really extensive, but it's also, there are a lot of dependencies within the questions. So if people start to fill it out, a lot of the questions will be removed along the way. What I also wanted to mention is that we took into account the data management cycle. So really use all the phases from plan to reuse to make sure that everything is thought about. And hopefully during their research, they won't encounter any nasty surprises. And then the communication. So we've launched this grant application template, and we wanted to let people know, of course. We have different channels for this. So we have the RDM manual in Teams. In this manual, we also use the data lifecycle to provide a lot of information on what options there are within the institute and what type of solutions you can think of. Also for storing data, for example, if you want to do it in a fair way, think about file naming, think about folder structure. So this is a lot of information in one place, and we also added this DMP section and linking to DMPonline. And we also have a startup manual there, so they can just follow the steps and get started on DMPonline. We also have a training for new employees, and I must say we're providing it for old employees as well, because we started last year in January. So we have a lot of catching up to do. But now we're almost at the end of the number of people, at the end of the number of employees. So we've provided it to a lot of people. And we also have a section here in which we talk about the templates and also about DMPonline. So it's really to, at the start of their employment, make people aware of what options there are and to guide them into this direction. So this is sort of the basic, this is the way to write your DMP template. We also have a data stewardship network. As was mentioned, I coordinate about 30 local data stewards, which sounds like a lot, but they are not full-time data stewards. So they have the role of data steward within their research group. And we have a meeting every 6 to 8 weeks, in which we also discuss new tools, for example, and this grant application template. So they are aware of the existence, and they're able to communicate it to their PI, but also to, for example, postdocs within their group, and advise them on the right way to use this and to be able to find it. So yeah, a lot of remaining issues still, because we've discovered that there are different phases in which the DMP is required or is used. For example, during grant application, there are often sections in which data management information is required, but it's not the same as the DMP that is required after receiving a grant. And also, I mentioned the PhD project specific template we've developed. And yeah, we've seen that this can be really useful as well. Well, it's not a requirement, of course, but it can be used to give a bit of guidance within a PhD project. So within the 4 years, usually, that PhDs are here, just to give them a bit of a framework to start with. Yeah, and the use for application at other funders, we have Sonnenweg and NWO now, but it's difficult to get it accepted by other funders as well. So I mentioned KICA and KWF, but they have their own templates, they're not that extensive, but I think it's mostly the fact that they know where to find the information within the form that they created. And for KWF, it's even that they have an online system in which you, you provide your information as a grant, as you apply for a grant. And so it's difficult to incorporate this grant application template into that structure and into that process. Then we also have the difference between the clinical and the preclinical research, and we've now been able to apply it to the preclinical research, but for the clinical research, the processes are a bit different. They also work with the Medical Ethical Committee. It's mostly clinical trials that they work with, and they have their own requirements. So we'll have to see if the template has to be changed a bit to make it more applicable also to the clinical research. And we have had some difficulty including this template in our internal grant review process. So the idea was to have people as a standard use this template when they start writing on their grants, but in practice we found out that in that space of time they don't have a lot of time. So we'll have to find another way to get to the researchers after they've received the grant, which is also a bit difficult because after the review procedure, then people just start to work on their own projects again. So we'll have to see how we can link to that. And I think the basic thing is that getting researchers to invest their scarce time to plan ahead to fill out the DMP is also a difficulty, and maybe that underlies it all. So I'm not sure if other people have experience in this, but I would like to hear how you do that at other institutions as well. First, the acknowledgements. So all these people have played a part in developing or providing some information, or just being there. Of course, the parents and the children in the hospital. It's important that they work along with the research as well. So thank you. And if there are any questions or maybe some input, I'd like to hear.
Thank you very much for that interesting overview. And I think we're somehow familiar with the two big Dutch funders, but you brought some in that I've never heard of before. And it's interesting to see that they bring their own kind of challenges with them. Are there any, we are a small crowd today, are there any questions from anyone here? Or
not a question, but just also confirmation for Jet that the same difficulties apply within our institute. So it's difficult for the researchers to spend the time in advance to plan their research data. And we have made some aspects as obligatory, because all our PhDs have to fill in our institutional DMP templates prior to the start of their project. So it's part of their promotion tract. So this is obligatory, mandatory.
So it's independent of the funding.
Yeah, independent of the funding.
Oh, that's nice.
And if they have a NWO or SONW project, then it's a two-step rocket for them, because they can use the DMP for both purposes. and some of them, and we try to be pragmatic, because if they have another funder like the KWF or another Health Holland or something, then we try to do a bit of both. But for all they have to hand in a DMP in the registration system, and they have to follow up also yearly on the DMP. So we try to also to involve the supervisors within that. So we try to emphasize that it's not solely up to the researchers, but also for the supervisors to update the DMP.
Yeah, I'm wondering, what are the consequences when they don't provide this information, when they don't fill out the DMP?
Then they don't get their people. Then they don't get their manuscripts checked.
Aha.
So at the end of the project, they have to also draw up a paragraph, so a bit of a subset from the DMP. And if the paragraph is not a part of the manuscript, then it doesn't get checked and appraised.
Okay.
So,
Aha.
so this is a bit of the stick, not the carrot, but the stick approach. But by doing so, by informing our PhDs and also supervisors, we try also to spread the word and to make it a bit of to get it in the DNA of the researchers. And we started with the PhDs.
Yeah, I think what I notice is that the training we provide also helps with that, because when they start, well, they are still learning about the culture of the institute. And when we already provide this information, it's normal to think about your storage. It's normal to think about your whole data management plan. Then they're more willing, I think, or I hear that as well. Yeah.
Interesting to hear about this like
it's psychology.
like sticks and carrots. We have one comment, which is, I think, like, because you described the Dutch situation here is like fairly special, I think. So I don't know if you could expand a bit on the willingness of funders to approve institutional templates. I think that's something I understood, that's something they offered from themselves.
Yeah. So for Zonneweg and NWO, they work together to approve these institutional templates. So it feels like it's promoted. It's appreciated, and they are really willing to look at your template and provide feedback, also to make it a bit better and to have it match their own requirements as well. So that was quite a nice process, actually. Yeah.
And maybe we can add that, like, I mean, NWO themselves, they're like are part of the DMPonline user community for actually, like, are looking into that workflow again, and we'll have discussions with them of like what we can potentially change in the system, or what features we would need to bring in to make that even easier for them. I think the main reason why they introduced this approval of templates is that they understood that a lot of institutions were creating their own templates to tailor it to exactly what you've introduced, provide options on institutional storage and things like that, which obviously is really good practice. So I think they just, or the way I understood it is that they thought, like, if we approve the institutional templates, then you actually do already quite a lot of the work of training people, and people don't like have to touch two different templates, or like different templates for different funders, and actually they want to support that. So that's why I think they introduced this offer to look over what you create in the institution, and just say, like, yeah, that fits in what we would expect to see, and then don't insist on their own.
Yeah, what I've noticed for the other funders, so KWF and Kika, they are positive about an institutional template, but I think the difficulty is to get it into their system. And yeah, we haven't found a solution to that. And I think I have to have a bit more intense communication with them to try to find a way to
Maybe the other funders are not that far yet, because Zonneweg and MWO, there's also a big difference in that they also want to waiver the responsibility to the institutes on promoting good data management practices. So they say, well, the data steward of their own institute can make a better judgment about the choices for the researchers. And Zonneweg and MWO don't have the knowledge or don't want to have also the personnel to follow up on that also. So it's up to the institute to provide good quality research. So it's a bit of both. So it's not only a gesture towards the institutes, but they also have they profit from that because they don't have to spend as much trouble in checking these DMPs and providing feedback and stuff. So, and the other funders like KWF are not that far yet. So, but the first step also for Zonneweg and MWO, that they got a bit of a mapping document. Before they approved our institutional templates, there was a bit of an in-between phase that you provide a mapping document on question 1 is the same as your question 2.0 or something. So that could be a bit of a trade-off, I guess, with the KWF or KICA to start with, that you provide a mapping that you can immediately find the solution.
Yes, because I did, but still, it's not a one-on-one, and I think they have to search through a lot more information than they would if just the information that they require is provided. So I think that's the difficulty in this process. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's really interesting though, and I guess it's also if you're a funder that's specializing in just one domain, you might have the expertise to check the data management plans that like maybe wider funders don't necessarily have. So then they default to.
Yeah, and I think also for our institute, because a lot of research group, I think we have. Well, as I mentioned, the 30 local data stewards, which also means at least 30 research groups, and they all work on pediatric cancer. So, if we're able to provide a good institutional template, then they might also be able to use it for other cancer-related research. I think it's a good opportunity, but
Train them early.
Spend a bit more time on getting this done.
Yeah, I guess that's the culture change that we're all been waiting for, or working on, right? Don't see any other questions. Anyone have further comments or questions? Doesn't look like it. Then I say again, thank you very much, Jet, for a really interesting insight into one of the corners of and the specialties of the Dutch systems that we don't get to see quite that often, but is actually really, really interesting and useful, and also the clinical trials and that kind of research as always comes with slightly different challenges, and I learned a lot from what you've just shown us. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing that knowledge with us. And I guess Diana, are you okay to do the wrap up for the session?
Yeah. So thank you very much. This was really interesting. I suggested that you add further comments and questions on the notes. I've added the notes on the comments. At the end of this session, I will put the recording on YouTube and email you so that you have the video. So we have a user group next week on the 27th of April. The URL, there is a link from the page, so you can so you can go and register. Typically, it is open to people who are subscribed, but we are accepting people who are interested in subscriptions as well. It's going to be a half-a-day session in which we'll discuss priorities, development priorities, and new features that we will bring for DMPonline. So I hope you can join us, because we want to hear from you, and so that we can shape our future development plans. And then the next drop-in is on the 17th of May, and the guest speaker is Melanie Gayen. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, from Open University in Netherlands. I hope I will communicate the title of the talk as soon as I hear from her. Other than that, thank you very much for joining, and I hope I can see all of you on next week on the user group.